one of the, I think, biggest things that we have both learned out of this is we both accept each other exactly for who we are. Both of us have said that the relationship is stronger now than it was at any point before.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 240. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an interview with Tom. Tom's been poly for about 15 years. He got his start on Craigslist.
Yeah, well, 15 years / his whole life. As he'll talk about.
As he'll expand on. Thanks for the correction.
But he's been officially giving it a whirl for the last 15 years.
Right. And him and his wife have been kind of in and out of ethical non-monogamy as they figured out what works best for them. And they've somewhat recently found more of a groove.
Yeah, it's a great conversation, and we're super grateful to Tom for reaching out and for coming on and sharing this. Another thing that Tom does, which is awesome, is he's a local community organizer in Colorado. He does something called the Colorado Poly Weekend. He'll tell you all about this, and there will be links in the podcast show notes of where you can reach out to Tom and how you can learn more about that and sign up for future ones.
Yes. To find the podcast show notes, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and then click on the podcast tab. There you can find podcast show notes for every single episode, including pictures of our guests and links to all of the resources that our guests mention. It's a lot of information, and you should definitely go check it out. Also, while you're on our website, you can go check out our Patreon community. We're incredibly grateful for each and every one of you that's part of this community. It keeps growing, and we love all of you. We have ongoing MeWe chats, monthly Q&As, monthly men's and women's groups meetings, and you can find all of the information on our website, Normalizing Non-Monogamy. Click on the Patreon tab.
Yeah, as Emma said, a huge thank you to all of you for being a part of the community and for helping us build something absolutely incredible. We're excited about it, and we get a ton out of it every single day. So thank you all for being our friends and for supporting the show.
If you're out there looking for community and Patreon is not the best fit, we also do monthly virtual meet and greets. We just had one last week with over 30 people, and it was awesome. We're going to be taking the month of July off from the virtual meet and greets for the summer, but we plan to be back in August. So check it out and come back and join us then.
Absolutely. We'll see you in August.
Yes.
Well, we'll see you before August.
Hopefully, but also in August. On the virtual meet and greet.
Yeah. The last thing we wanted to talk about here in the intro before we let you get into Tom's interview is our favorite way to get tested for STIs and also our favorite affiliate sponsor of the show, stdcheck.com. When you use the links in the show notes, you save $10, which brings the cost of a $10 test. Of a 10-panel test down to $130.
It's actually $129.
It is $129. And this is a service Emma and I uses. We absolutely love it. It is super easy. It is fast. And again, it is low cost. It is affordable. You basically sign up online. They fax your information over to whatever lab you choose, any local lab. You show up, you give them some blood and some other stuff, and then in a couple of days, you get your results texted to you, and you can go check them out in your online portal and share them with whoever needs to see them.
Yes.
Again, this is a service Emma and I use. We wouldn't tell you about it if we didn't use it and love it. Again, using the links saves you $10, and it also helps support the show financially. So thank you in advance for doing that. And thank you in advance for being awesome sexual health advocates.
Yes, thank you. And you can find the links again on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, under resources. While you're on our website, another thing you can do is contact us, reach out to us, send us a voicemail, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to come on the podcast and share your story, we'd love to have you. Or if you just want to send us a question or feedback, we'd also love to have that. So go and reach out to us too.
There's tons to do on that website.
So much information.
We should probably add like some Angry Birds or anyway. Some fun games to play over there.
Yeah, we can look into adding those.
All right, yeah, that's not happening. So anyway, we'll see everybody after this interview with Tom for the outro, and we've got lots of exciting things to tell you about there. Or maybe we don't. You'll have to listen. You'll have to listen to find out.
Wow, way to tease it. Yeah, let's go talk to Tom. Well, welcome to the podcast, Tom. We're so excited to talk to you today. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Do you mind introducing yourselves for us and for the listeners? Because we've been talking to you for about 6 minutes and we don't know anything about you. So welcome.
Sure. My name's Tom Satter. I am been poly for about 15 years. And well, okay, I've been poly my whole life. I figured out I was poly about 15 years ago. Yeah, I run a thing called the Colorado Poly Weekend. It's like a once or twice a year thing right now. And I'm pretty active in the poly community here in the Denver area. And that very busy life and happy. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll circle back and get all the gooey details on the poly weekend.
Okay.
But I'm curious, you said, well, you've been poly forever and you just realized it 15 years ago or so. So
take us back.
Take us back to forever and then take us back to 15 years ago and what happened then that made it a reality for you.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where you go back in life and you look at it and you're like, wow, I'm pretty sure that when I was little, I was poly for sure. I mean, I definitely, the friendships I had and the connections I had, lots of really close emotional connections with both boys and girls at that point in life. It's like, oh, but then I was raised in a very religious household. My dad was a pastor, and, growing up, it was always just, especially getting to dating age, it's like, you're going to marry one person. You're going to date one person. You're going to marry one person. You're not going to have sex till you get married. And then you stay married forever till one of you dies, and then you can do something else. And, it definitely went right down that path. It was like raised very religiously. And it's like, and we weren't a fundamentalist religion, which I'm thankful for, but, it's still very much on the relationship escalator going right up it. And, got out of high school and went into college and met my now wife in college, and we got married right out of college. It's like just the normal progression, and bought a house, and, we're working, and eventually had kids. And, it was about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years where after the kids were born, when I figured out that I was poly. It was a many year journey to get to that point, because, throughout the marriage, we'd been married, I don't know, 10 years or so before we had kids. And a number of times in that time, forming a close emotional relationship with usually another woman, for different circumstances. One was, working on my master's degree and having somebody, we weren't working on a project together, but we were both working on our thesis projects, and we would just meet at a coffee shop every week so that we would actually work on it. And so doing that for 6 months, it's like getting very close. And it's funny, all the things you learn after you're poly. I guess not being poly, I eventually may have learned these things too, but like learning the term demisexual and understanding that, like, I do not usually experience sexual attraction to people at all. But then when I get close to them, it's like, oh, it becomes like a physical relationship. It's like, that's more of an important thing. And it's like, but everybody you meet generally in those situations is also monogamous. The majority of the people out there are.
Right.
And I was monogamous at that point. It's like, okay, like, after we finished our thesis projects, saying, hey, we should stay in touch. It's a really good friendship. Let's not lose that. And at that point, it was just a really close friendship. So we scheduled to go out after work one day, and she's like, this feels too much like a date. We can't do that. It's like, okay. And, you lose the whole relationship. It's kind of like, there isn't like a weird middle ground typically for having a partner who's really close emotionally. In the monogamy world, it doesn't typically work like that. So we, that broke up. There were a couple of other ones like that. And after like 3 times, I was like, this really stinks. I don't like it.
Yeah. And I think it's that idea that if you get close emotionally with somebody, and it's somebody of the same gender as you, it's easy to be like, oh, we're just really close friends.
Yes.
But if that happens and you are now opposite gendered or not the same gender, then like all of a sudden it's risky, it's scary. Oh, now we're dating, now we could fall in love. And there's a whole element that comes along with that. And then I just wanted to also comment on your demisexual piece of like, that is a very interesting, I hadn't really thought about it like this, but the idea that like, you don't really know the attraction is there until you get to know the person. And then you're almost sort of in too deep in a way, right?
Yeah. It was weird. And it was like, okay. And so, yeah. Well, it's funny is, so at this point, like we have 2 kids. We've been married for 17 years at this point. And it's like, okay, so I talked to my wife. I'm like, I want to be able to form a relationship with somebody and not have, and have it be allowed to go past the point of being emotionally close, be able to have a physically close relationship too. And it surprised me because she said yes. And I wasn't anticipating that. But then I didn't have any idea what to do. I didn't know the word polyamory at that point. This was, like late 90s, early 2000s. And it was kind of like, okay, so I posted an ad on Craigslist, in their personal section at that point. And I'm like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm not leaving my partner. I love my relationship with them. I'm looking for other friends. And part of this was drawn out of the first 3 people I had met were all people who were monogamous. I mean, it's like, I don't want to spend the time to get emotionally close to somebody and then find out after the fact that, okay, that's not going anywhere. Right. So I just like, okay, I'm just going to look for people who are like me. But I didn't use the word polyamory because I didn't know it then. So I was like, okay. And okay, I didn't know this then. Now I look back and this never happens, but somebody replied to my post who lives 3 blocks away from me and is like,
whoa,
I am in the same boat. Like I'm married, I have a partner, we're open, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I can't believe this. And we ended up going out and we dated for about 3 months. And in those 3 months, we got closer and closer. And it was actually a pretty good relationship. It was working out great. And it was starting to actually get to the physical side. Like we'd gone out quite a number of times. We both were going pretty slowly. And we got to a point where it's like just starting to get physical. And my wife is like, I'm not comfortable with this. Like, it was one thing to be comfortable with it abstractly. It's a different thing to be comfortable with it in reality. And
when it's actually happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and then at the same time, that partner called me and we were having a conversation. He says, like, I think we're finally at the point where we can tell our spouses we're ready for the divorce. And I'm like, okay, like we had a long conversation when we first started. That's not where we were going. I love my wife. I'm like, I do not want a divorce. Like I never have. And She was just looking for somebody as a safety, somebody to hold on to as she left her marriage. And I didn't know that. And so the whole thing fell apart. And then we went through like 4 years of making every mistake in the book, right? You and
your wife.
My wife and I, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so I'm like, fine, I won't be polyamorous. So I said for a year, I'm not going to do it. But yeah, at that point, I had found the word polyamory and I was on some poly groups online and like, just learning more about the community. I'm like, this is who I am. I mean, I know that's who I am. I'll just be monogamous. And I'm like, end up, turning more like bitter, kind of resentful. And I'm like, that does not work because this is going to just kill the marriage. This isn't. And so after work or a year of that, we're like, okay, that's not working out. And then, so she's like, well, just don't tell me, right? Just, you can do what you want, effectively don't ask, don't tell. And I'm sure that there are people, I've heard of people where that works great. And I think they must communicate in a way that's like, somehow they know what not to ask and what not to tell. I don't know. I'm really not good at it. I'm kind of like, so what'd you do today? I went out to lunch. Oh, who'd you go to lunch with? I'm like,
myself,
Yeah.
all by myself, right? Yeah.
I went out with nobody that you want to know about, right? So anyway,
we had an interview. I was just going to jump in really quick, Tom. We had an interview a couple of months ago where somebody was talking about their don't ask, don't tell. And they were like, it works great, but part of the don't ask, don't tell is the don't ask. And what's a problem is my wife and we love to share what we're doing in our lives. And so I would come home from being out and she'd be like, how was your day? What was going on? How are you? What happened? And then I have to start lying over and over and over again to protect my partner instead of
that doesn't work.
And that doesn't work either. And so it forces you into a lying situation that really doesn't work.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, it was a rough year. And also, that was a point where I wasn't on dating sites yet. I was on, I think, Adult Friend Finder because that was like discreet. But the people I tended to meet there are people who are cheating on their spouses. That was ethically difficult. I wasn't looking for that. And at that point, I was getting to know more about polyamory. And I was like, that's really, I think, the way I need to go. And then, we went forward. We basically stopped doing that. It stopped. I actually had a partner I met on Adult Friend Finder. We ended up having sex. It was great. And it also wasn't great. It was like, after that, it was kind of like, I realized I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm like, it just feels like lying all the time to me. So, thankfully that one wasn't a relationship that was, she was cheating on her husband. That wasn't one that was probably going to last anyway. So that relationship ended. And then basically the next year was really rough. I mean, it was just trying to work through, it's like unpacking all the monogamy. It's like, especially in, if you follow the relationship escalator and your lives just get intertwined, a lot of it is really just trying to separate two lives back out so that you're autonomous. And, thankfully, my wife and I are both very autonomous people. We like to do things together. Our lives are entwined in that we're nesting partners. But even that, all your friends are the same. It's just difficult. And so we started doing that, and we eventually separated. We had 2 small children at that point and separated, and we're like, okay, I lived in the house, but I was living in the basement in my room, and she had her own room upstairs. And we did that for about 4 months until we finally came to the realization that ultimately what you have to figure out is I'm going to be polyamorous. I know that. At that point, I was pretty clear that that's who I was. I'm a polyamorous person. And it's, do we want to be in a new relationship where I'm poly and she's either monogamous or poly? She can decide. Or do we want to not be in that relationship? Right. But effectively, the monogamous relationship we had originally is over. Right. And it's like trying to come to terms with that and understand that you can't move forward with the original relationship the way it was. It took a lot of time to like let that go and grieve it. It's kind of like this.
I was gonna say there's a grieving process there because your relationship has fundamentally changed.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, so we did. And then you get to the point of that when, okay, that one's finally, you're getting better with that being done. How do we want to go forward? Right. And then you get a little bit more of a clean slate. Okay. Do we want to go forward? And we more or less sat down and said, okay, we think we'd like to stay together. We still love each other. We still, the things that we do together, we like. How do we make that work? Right. And so we did. And that was about 14 years, somewhere around there ago. Yeah. Then since then, I've been poly. And I got on OkCupid and was on Poly Matchmaker years ago when it was a thing. In fact, I'll talk about that a little later. The Poly Matchmaker community was a big deal because at that point it was the only active forums. There weren't.
Sure.
There weren't the Facebook or Yahoo groups yet. So anyway, I was on those poly groups. I'm like, okay. And I started dating people on OkCupid, and I realized how incredibly rare it is to find anybody local to me who's not monogamous.
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
and to find somebody who actually was a decent match, too. I mean, I must have gone on 50 first dates, with people who are like, yeah, some of them are still friends, where it's like, but we're not going to date, right? Or they live 30 miles away, or they live, across the country. That's not uncommon. It's also funny to look back and realize how nervous I was, those first dates. And now it's like no big deal. It's like, whatever. You really get used to it.
Yeah. I have a question going back to the original conversation you and your wife had about, like, where you felt like you could go on to the and make the post, and you met the person that was 3 blocks away. Like, the conversations that you two had that got you to that point, where when you were talking about that, was the conversation like, I'm interested in meeting other, like, potential sexual and romantic partners, and I want to do this with you? Like, was she in the boat of like, I want to do it too? Or was it like, well, go ahead, Tom, but like, I don't know, like, because that's a big leap to just like bring to a monogamous marriage after 10 plus 15 years or so.
It was.
And all of a sudden you want to like go and maybe date other people. So like, what did that transition look like? Even though it sounds like you tried it, it was a dumpster fire, you put the fire out, you moved to the basement, you moved back, you redid, you started to get it on the right track. But that initial, that initial jump off the platform.
It wasn't great. It wasn't, I didn't have anywhere near the communication skills that I've learned since then. Yeah, that's one thing I'd say being in the polyamory community has been wonderful for, is that it's kind of like a master's course in communication and just learning about yourself too, introspection. Back then I didn't know the words. What I was like is like, I know I form emotional connections with people. I didn't realize at that point that I was bi. At that point I'd been raised, like I said, very religiously, but also went to high school and college in Wyoming, which was not known at that point for their gay friendly world. And
are they today?
No, but they are getting better. Like I have some nephews who go to college at the University of Wyoming, which is where I went. And I am actually very hopeful with the things they talk about, that there's definitely more
progressive
acceptance going on, which is good, because it was very bad in the 80s. So anyway, it was one thing. It was like, okay, and now I don't have any partners who are male right now, but I have had male, not quite partners, but almost partners. And that's wonderful. It's definitely interesting. Anyway, but back then with my wife, the conversation literally was, not very long, maybe half an hour and an hour, talking about, I know I form these connections with people. I would like to, if I get close to somebody and it feels like the relationship is moving to a physical relationship, to be able to take it to a physical relationship. We didn't ever talk about like swinging. I didn't even know about it then. But she was not interested in doing that in a physical relationship with anyone else. So,
but initially at the outset, she was at least supportive of you trying this.
She was. We've talked about it since, and I think it was more she was afraid I was going to leave. Is the way it comes across.
Almost like just a fear response.
The poly under duress, right?
Yeah, and it definitely is something where you get, or I get to this point and look back, and I'm like, there's so many things I could have done so much better, but I didn't know it then. It's hard, and I think at this point, both of us would say, I've talked to my wife many times since then. One of the, I think, biggest things that we have both learned out of this is we both accept each other exactly for who we are. Like when we were married, it was a little bit more of a, it's still that projection of how, you're projecting your ideal mate onto your partner and somewhat trying to change them a little bit into this or that. And there's none of that going on at this point. At least not that I consciously am seeing. If we ever see it consciously, we stop it. Where it's like, no, that's who you are. This part about you, there's some things you do that annoy me a little bit or don't. But the vast majority of the things we do together, I love. And that's awesome. And I want you to be happy. And we both do that. And, there are certain things that, maybe not relationship wise, but in other parts of life that I may not have accepted about her, that, part of coming through all of this is learning to accept those and be like, yeah. And both of us have said that the relationship is stronger now than it was at any point before that. So yeah, it definitely was an interesting journey. It takes quite a while. We were both on, there were Yahoo groups back then called like Living Polymono and another called Polymono that dealt with people who were trying to transition to a polymono relationship.
And this was after the two of you kind of decided to try to go back into this together.
Yeah. In those times. Yeah. And it was, we were on those groups. There was somebody who had posted something that said, roughly you should count on a month for every year that you were together if you're trying to switch a relationship. And, we were together 17 years. It took us more than 17 months, but it still took quite a while. It takes a long time.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure it's still ever evolving, right? Like, it's not like you hit a mark and you're like, oh, well, I'm glad we're through that. This is easy now.
It is much, much easier now. But yeah, it was not like we flipped the switch and everything was golden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very funny. Yeah.
I also wanted to go back to, I think it's a pretty amazing thing the two of you did where it was, you tried it, it kind of blew up in your face. You actually got to a point of like, maybe we should separate. You moved to the basement and then 4 months later, you're like, well, what the hell are we doing? Like, are we together? Are we not together? Do we want to be together? Do we want to be apart? And then it was like, all right, well, let's tear this shit down to the foundation and build what we want to build. And it sounds like you got, after many months, many years probably, to a place of we just accept each other. And I think that from moving to the basement to we just accept each other, like that's a huge, huge journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. It was not all rainbows, after that day.
I don't believe it was at all. I don't know if there was any rainbows.
We decided, okay, we're staying together. But then the first time I had an actual partner that was a real partner, and a real poly partner, it was definitely trying for a while. It's like we were going through the growth spurts of how do you, and part of, okay, I don't know how many people you'll have in poly world who will tell you this, but it's like, there's always the question of, do you tell the kids or not? And I told the kids right away, because I'm like, if I have a partner who's my first partner who was more than like a couple months, was a long distance partner. And so when she would come out, she would stay either in a hotel, but my kids would see her. It's not like she's invisible, right? And so we told them right away, because they're like, just so you know, I have other partners. They're here. That's what's going on. We're all good with this. And
do you mind me asking how old your kids were at that point, approximately?
At that point, my daughter was probably 8-ish, 7 in that area. And my son was probably 2 or 3.
Okay. So pretty young.
Yeah. So for my son, he grew up with it being something that he's known his whole life. My daughter still remembers before that. And she also was more aware during the times when we were like growing into it. I don't know if that makes sense, but she's more like, there were definitely times when I would go out on a date where my wife would stay home and she would be upset about it. And my daughter remembers those times. We've talked about it since then. She's just graduating from college now. So it's something I think that was a little hard for her. The other thing that was difficult was, and at that age, you don't know your kids' friends' parents. That I knew them well in that I saw them a lot, but I didn't know them well in that I knew them that well. I knew their names were, Joe's mom, right?
Yep.
And it is awkward. I did run into one of them out at the restaurant one time when I was with a different partner, and she basically saw me, made eye contact, then ducked her head and left the restaurant, and would not talk to me about it again. And I definitely got vibes from people in that group that, oh, you're cheating on your wife, But I mean, It took a little while, but by that point, I was out as poly. I am 100% out on Facebook. Everybody who asks me about it, I'll tell them I'm not going around evangelizing it.
Yeah.
It's it's not like you have to do a lot of asking in order for me to let you know. And if I run into people in general, if they talk to me, I'll be like, "Oh, this is my partner, so and so. We're in an open relationship. Fine." That was also a little tricky because my wife and I weren't at the same point as far as how out we wanted to be. Especially when the kids were in school, she was more wanting to make it so she wasn't out. That's really hard when one of us is. It took me a little while to get to the point where I was fully out. But by the time we'd had that interaction, I think my daughter was in middle school or high school at that point. Just funny. The things you run into.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for sharing that about the kids too, because that's a question that we get all of the time asking about. Well, what age is appropriate? When do because you don't want to hide things from them, but you want to also, in some ways, protect them, but from society too. But then there's just so many considerations to go into of what to do.
Yeah, it's always tricky. I don't think the kids haven't done badly by it. We've, over the years, we've moved more towards a kitchen table poly model. And I now have a partner who's local, who I've been with for a little over 8 years. And she also has kids about our kids' age. Their kids, our kids, they get along, but it's not like close friends. But, we regularly get together. We'd go to the water park together as families. And they're pretty close. My wife and my partner do things together. They do some friendly things together. They do some work together because they run a business that they kind of work together in, which is definitely interesting. So it's interesting. Life has taken a different turn than I kind of anticipated it would, but I'm really liking it. So
Well, and I think it's interesting too, like that, you kind of talked about, right? In those early years, you going out on a date is probably way harder than you going out on a date today. Yeah. And that was sort of what your daughter was probably picking up on, like dad went out on a date, or dad went out, even if she didn't know where you went, and her mom is having a hard time with it. And so like, how do you explain that within the confines of like, no, he's not doing anything wrong, but it is still hard. Like there's that line of like, no, he's not wrong, but I'm still struggling. I'm still working through this. And like, that's a hard concept, even as an adult to process. And so as a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old, like, yeah, that's challenging.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. It's like everything else. It's kind of like you go through it and then you do it. And the more you do it, the things that seemed scary become less scary. And that's been true for both me and my partners and my wife. I think all the things that we thought were really hard in the moment, but now, it's like, oh, okay, whatever. It's not a big deal now.
And that was in no way a negative on your wife. Like, well, if only she had been able to like handle it.
No,
like, not at all. Like, that's hard shit. Like, you've never done that before. No one teaches you. You don't go through school learning how to do that. So
yeah, they don't. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So let's see what else. Other things. So I'll run through my current partners and then we can back up a little. I have,
Sure.
I have another partner who lives, about an hour's drive from here. And I see her about every week and a half. And we've been together for 5 years. And that's actually a really good relationship. Just, not the one that lives closer to me is in town. So we see each other more often. Then I have a long distance partner who is somebody I know from a thing called the Vermont Poly Weekend, which I'll talk about in a bit. But
Yeah.
she and I met there years ago, and over COVID we ended up like starting to just Zoom back and forth, and it turned into an actual relationship. But we've been dating now for a year. But she lives in Brooklyn, so that's a long distance when we see each other only a few times a year. So those are the 4 relationships I'm in right now. They're really good, very strong, and it's interesting to everybody gets together. It's funny because we're very much a distributed polycule. Like if I started mapping it out one time and I get to like 15 people and I stop because I start running to the point where I don't know who their other partners are. 3 levels out.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, is your wife at this time still monogamous, or is she poly now too?
She's said that she considers herself poly at this point. It's her story to tell, but I don't. She's not seeing anybody right now.
Yeah,
that would be awesome if she wanted to. It's awesome if she doesn't. I don't. It's not my place to tell her what relationships to have.
Yeah.
My other partners all have other partners. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe she will someday. Maybe not.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange.
I guess, can you touch on telling the kids and everything, but how has the journey gone the last, I guess I'm going to estimate like 10 years to get to where you're at now, if things are being much easier? Like, are there pieces of that journey that stand out to you that would be important to share? Or
so a lot of it was a lot of it was just straight up consistency, and trust. It's like I said this all the time when I first started going down the polyamory path. I would tell my wife, I love you. I have no intention of leaving this relationship. But I think that's such a trope that, everybody says that. and then they leave. And then I honestly think a lot of it is just being very consistent with, I've now, I have 4 partners right now total. I've had other partners come and go over the years. I'm not leaving. Right. And this, the other thing that's really funny is learning about things, I would now consider myself solo poly, but I'm in a nesting relationship, and I was in a nesting relationship before I even knew that was a word. Right. Or an option. So it's kind of like, okay, when I look at it, one of my dreams would be like buy a trailer, go and just drive around the country and spend a week with this person and 2 months with that person, and just end up with different people. And I still eventually think I'll move that way. We have another project that's going on right now that's kind of interfering with that, but I didn't know that. Getting into it, right. It's kind of, I don't know. I forgot. Sorry, you can do what you want with this, but I don't remember what the original question was. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was sort of like along the line, just like what have you learned throughout the last 10 years that has helped you and your wife get to a place of this is a little bit easier.
The consistency. That's where we were. Yeah. So it's consistency and saying I'll be here, and I may not be here physically all the time, and that part I understand has changed. but emotionally and supportive wise and everything else, I'm here. And, and I hope my partners all think that, I think they do. They know they're all loved. I know that, so, it was an interesting journey, even that part. A lot of it was just getting to know the community more. It's hard when you very first start out down the non-monogamy path and not knowing people. There's a very active group in Boulder called the Boulder Poly Meetup that I've been at various levels of involvement with over the years. But they meet every single Monday for a discussion group and then social time afterward. And the person who runs it has been running it every single Monday for like 12 years, I think, 11 or 12 years at this point, which is amazing. And they now do one on Thursdays with a virtual one on Thursdays because during Zoom it was all virtual and some people really liked the virtual version. But that community, I've ended up with, a number of friends in that community, which is nice. And so is my wife. She's gone to that and, has met many people from there. And my other partners, my other partner is very active in the Denver Metro Poly group. And so she's involved with that. It's been really good. I think it's nice. I don't date most of the people I know. I haven't dated them. I just like them. They're just, in general, what I've found is that the people who get to poly have generally done an awful lot of inner work to get to that point. And many of them are people who I really, really like hanging out with. Right. So it's pretty neat. I've liked that a lot.
Yeah. It sounds like you very much over the years just found and cultivated the community around you to really support you.
Yeah, you do. I have. Yeah. Yeah. So, one thing about that was when I was brand new to poly, I was on Poly Matchmaker. I told you that. It's a terrible dating site. It always was a terrible dating site. But at that point, it had forums. Like you could actually go on and chat with people. And they were very active. And then the guy who ran it became more and more paranoid and the forums went away. But then everything moved over to Facebook or Yahoo. So, but before all that happened, what I had many people that I would chat with electronically. I didn't know any of them in person. And I got to figure out they were all on the East Coast. Like everybody I knew was on the East Coast. And they would always talk about this thing called the Vermont Poly Weekend that they'd go and they'd host and they'd all get together. And I was like, oh, man, I would love to do that. And I started dating somebody who was off of that forum. That was the one I started dating long distance early on. We decided we would meet at the Vermont Poly Weekend. So we met up there. We met in Chicago once before that, just so we could have some alone time and see if it was something we wanted to move forward with as a relationship. But then, and
just I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second for context about how long ago was this that this happened?
Probably 13 years. It was after we had decided we're poly, but not that long after, maybe a year or two after. And so we, basically the Vermont Poly Weekend, I went to that in October. And one, it's October in Vermont, which is awesome. But two, it's 50 people at that one who were all poly. And it was the first time I'd been with a poly group that wasn't like just a discussion, right? And it's just people hanging out, talking, playing games, going for a hike, basically cooking something or whatever, hanging out together with 100% normalcy. If you have two partners sitting next to you on the couch holding hands, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't a swinger party. There wasn't sex going on in the living room or in bedrooms, but I'm sure in bedrooms there were, but it wasn't like open voyeuristic things. Right. It wasn't a kink party. It was just straight up poly. And it was amazing. You know, it's like I had never seen that, and to be able to be in it and be like, wow, this is one, really normal, and two, really cool just to get to hang out with a bunch of people that I enjoy hanging out with. And I got to meet that first time. I got to meet probably 7 people from the forums that I'd known for 2 years at that point. I got to actually meet in person, which was really cool. That's the first time I'd met any of them except that one partner.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was wonderful. The person who hosted that ran it 2 times a year in October and April for a long time, and only stopped when COVID started. So I don't know if it'll start back up in Vermont again or not. I don't run that one, but 7 years ago. So at that point, I'd been to the Vermont one. I don't know, maybe 8 times. 7 years ago, I started one in Colorado just once a year in the summer, and we would do something similar. The exception being the person who ran the one in Vermont owned the house, which is wonderful. I don't own a house that can host that many people. So, we'd rent a ski lodge or something.
Yeah.
And then in the summertime in Colorado, up in the mountains is beautiful. So we just rent a ski lodge, and we have somebody who does the cooking for the whole thing. And so all the meals are provided. You just basically show up and hang out with people. And, kind of the same thing. It definitely was growing pains doing it early on because learning how to do it. And also getting people, enrolled and coming out to Colorado and getting the local community to see that this is something that's pretty cool. We've done it for 7 years now. We skipped 2020 because COVID ran over it. And then in 2021, we had 2 of them. We had one last July and then another one in October because the Vermont one was canceled. So, it's been crazy. But now we're pretty much, usually we have about 30 people who go. Yeah. But since we only do them once a year, they generally fill up pretty quick. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that for 2022, this summer, you have one scheduled that's probably full by now.
Yeah, it's in June 8th or June 9th through the 13th. So it basically goes from like Thursday evening till Monday morning around 10 a.m. And then, the thing we're finding is that this is sending us down a different path, but we found that the real estate prices in Colorado are going way up, kind of like a lot of places. And so Vrbo's, and I think Vrbo and Airbnb and those guys have also made short-term rentals something that is so much more prevalent that a lot of people are buying those lodges. So the price of it is going up quite a bit, to the point where we basically last year bought a piece of property up in the mountains and are currently in the process of trying to build a house that's big enough to host. But that won't be ready for at least 2 years, maybe more. Yeah. So
it's exciting though.
It is. I'm very, very excited about it. One of the biggest things I'm excited about is the concept that I own the property, then I can host 4 times a year. Or I really, really would like to do one in the summer and one in the winter and do a ski one. Right. And the place we're near where we've bought is close enough to Winter Park that you can go up to Winter Park and ski. But the lodge prices have always been prohibitive. The winter season is, the expensive season here. So we've never done a winter one, but I'm looking forward to eventually being able to do that. So it'll be very exciting.
Yeah, cool. That's amazing. Yeah. I'd love to go back. So a few things like I keep thinking about are like, you talked about sort of discovering or realizing the bisexual side, your bisexual side, or that you are bisexual is probably the right way to say that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Realizing that you're bisexual, like where along that journey did that happen? And then are there other things throughout this poly adventure that you've learned about yourself that are sort of like new revelations that you think have been born out of this?
That's a good question. I I think that the bisexual, pansexual part was probably the realizations were there probably 10 years ago or so. It was only after I started having other partners. I mean, I wouldn't put myself as like a 3 on the Kinsey scale. I'm probably more like a 2. I'm not, but I wouldn't call it, what do they call it? There's one that's just barely past heterosexual and a little further than that. But it's basically my view is I'm attracted to men, but I am not attracted to masculinity, like that kind of hypermasculinity.
Sure.
Is a big turnoff to me. So there are definitely effeminate men that I really think are amazing, and I joined the Denver Gay Men's Chorus before COVID, so it must have been 2019, and sang with them for a year, and that was amazing. I mean, I just loved it. And they're a little bit overachievers in the choral singing world. I did not have the time to keep doing it. I was like, I did it for a year, and I'm like, it was like every waking moment for me to like keep up with all the stuff to memorize and stuff. But it was still a wonderful experience. And they're, just being with that many gay men and just getting to hang out. It basically, it was a way to verify, is this something I think is true for me or not? And it definitely was, it's like, yeah. I don't know. It was a good memory. I like them.
Yeah.
Other growth areas, it's been a very good way to learn more about acceptance, and the whole community. It's like getting to know many trans friends. I'm sure I had trans friends before who probably weren't out, but now everybody is out. I know people who are trans who are on every bit of the LGBTQIA spectrum, which is awesome. And there's also a fair amount of overlap with the kink community. So getting to see that too is fun. It's definitely interesting, like how many Venn diagram circles there are that intersect in this community, and getting to know them.
For sure.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier that you are out on Facebook and, you told your kids, but how did that journey go with telling family and friends in general?
So the Vermont one happens in early October, which is around my birthday. And so I've spent my birthday at the Vermont Poly Weekend many times. The way I came out to my mom was she called me on my birthday to say happy birthday. And we're talking on the phone and she's like, "What's that noise?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm at a conference." She's like, "What kind of a conference?" I was like, "Okay, here we go." So polyamory conference. It's a retreat. She's like, "What's polyamory?" So we had a good hour-long conversation about polyamory, and I've talked to her many times since then. She comes to the game nights with my partners all here, and my brother lives down the street, and he comes over. I told my brother and my sister right after I told my mom, because she's going to tell them. But I'm very, very fortunate in that my brother and my sister have always been accepting. And my mom, I don't think she was ever worried about it. She just had a lot of questions. Now, my other partner who lives in town and I have season tickets where we go to the theater with my mom. So, it's like we interact a lot. It's really,
that's super
wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing that like they come to game night and hang out and they're just sort of like they're just in with it. I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, the funny part, like when I started dating my partner who's an hour away, one of the first things I did is I didn't even think about it. I just invited her and her husband to game night. And for me, it's just game night. It's like a bunch of people not all partners. It's just friends and partners and family.
Mm-hmm.
Hanging out.
Yeah. And she shows up and it's like, we'd been dating, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months at that point. And she's like, "There's my mom, there's my brother, there's my other partners." It's like meet everybody all at once. She's like, "That was kind of a lot. You might
want to rethink that strategy a little bit."
Yeah, it was funny. It was just, I didn't think about it from that perspective, but she was right. But now it's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 I don't know. The community part is very important. It's neat to have
Yeah.
so many accepting people in life.
Yeah. You had said your dad was a pastor, and I think it's interesting. I was like thinking back, like there's probably been a dozen or at least half a dozen people who have been like, my dad was, my mom and dad were. So like, I'm just curious, like how have you been able to tell him about that?
No, because he died of a heart attack in 1999. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Well, it was rough back then. I guess now, it's been many years. So, so he died before I even knew I was poly.
Sure.
Honestly, I think he would have been okay. It would have been, I think, challenging in some ways, but, he wasn't, like I said, he was not a fundamentalist pastor. He was very much what I call somebody who was he was Lutheran, and he was, very much believed in like Jesus's teachings, and he was much more in the realm of you accept people, you love them, you feed the poor, you like that type of Christian, which I'm a little sad. Seems like a lot of the world has moved away from, and I've moved away from Christianity in general. Like I'm now an atheist, and I think that would have hurt him more honestly than the polyamory. So it's an interesting journey. I think he would have accepted where we're at, but who knows?
You can't. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
We've covered a lot of ground in the last hour. Do you have anything else that you wanted to share or get out there?
I don't have anything. I had written a list of things I was trying to remember to talk about. The only one I would say, it's not related to me personally, other than one thing I've learned, which is one thing I see a lot when I'm on poly groups, on discussion groups, is there's always people who are up there being like, I've been on dating sites for 2 weeks and I haven't found a single person. Yeah. And I'm like, one thing it has definitely taught me is you have to learn patience. You do not find a partner, even in the monogamous world, you don't find a partner who you're going to be close with and who's going to be a long-term relationship in 2 weeks. Like that just doesn't normally happen. It takes time to find people and to weed through them, and the other thing I think is funny is that always the discussion on online groups about, should I tell people I'm poly or not early on? Because if I tell them I'm poly, they don't go out with me. Like, you don't want them to go out with you. The whole point of a dating profile is like to filter all the ones out who are going to find out about that later and be mad at you. You don't want that.
No, that's exactly right. And I think too that the flip side, or what can happen, and we saw this, I think, for us early on, and it was more of a swinging friends with benefits dynamic that we were seeking out back then. But we would see the scarcity mindset of like, oh, well, it took me 3 months to get the first date. Yeah. And then you're like, well, I better make it work because I'm not going to wait around for another 3 months. So then you're like trying to like force a square peg into a round hole, and beating your head against the wall because it wasn't a good match. You're not a good fit, but like, I don't want to go back on the dating app. So we'll just suffer here for eternity.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very funny. Anyway, it's really interesting. Being on poly discussion group, for example, on Facebook, and going, oh yeah, okay. Same questions come up over and over. But anyway, that was the only one I had on my list that was ones we haven't talked about.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It's just important to remember patience. So
well, I'm glad you brought a list to the party. We didn't come with anything. We just showed up.
That's funny. The other thing I would say is that if people are interested in the Colorado Poly Weekend, we have a site. you can put it in the show notes. It's just
Yeah.
if you Google Colorado Poly Weekend, it pops up. It's just coloradopolyweekend.org. So
Perfect.
If people would like to be notified of when we get the house rented and know when it's coming, if they join the site, we basically email everybody who's a member of the site whenever we set up a new one. So that's the easiest way.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for adding that too.
And links will be in the show notes, and we're excited to send people your way. So
cool. Good.
Well, thank you for your time today, Tom, and for sharing your story and for the work you do with the different poly groups. And we're excited to get your story out there.
Yeah.
And we're excited to hear where it's at. And we'd love to talk to your wife at some point and hear the mono side of the journey. So maybe
awesome.
If she's listening, we can entice her to come our way, but no pressure, of course.
No pressure.
Tell her she might. That would be awesome. I love your podcast. I love listening to it, and just really happy for all the work you guys do too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And have a wonderful Colorado afternoon.
I will. Thank you.
And we're back. A huge thank you to Tom for coming on this podcast and sharing your story, and for the work you do in the community. We're so excited to get this out there.
Yes. And one thing we wanted to mention as well that we forgot, we talk about an episode with Norm around Don't Ask, Don't Tell policies. That is episode 187. Links will be in the show notes. You learned about that in the intro.
Yes.
Obviously. So you'll know where to go to find that, but it was a great conversation as well. So thank you, Tom. And thank you, Norm.
A quick reminder, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. There you'll find podcast show notes with pictures and links from our guests, as well as links to our virtual meet and greets. The next one will be in August, as well as links to our Patreon community and stdcheck.com, along with our other favorite resources. And you can reach out to us. There's a lot on our website, as we said in the intro.
And I added Angry Birds while you were listening to Tom.
Yeah, good job.
Or maybe I didn't. You'll have to go over there and find out for yourselves.
Yeah, go check it out. You got to go to our website anyway. Go see if Finn's lying or not.
Yeah, so something exciting is coming up this Friday, Emma.
Yes, we have a new Focus Friday episode coming out this Friday, all about sexting.
Yeah, it's fun. I've been really honing my sexting skills the last year and a half, so I think I maybe taught Bex a few things. That's who's coming on to the show to talk about it. Bex Caputo.
Yes.
Awesome sex educator, kink educator, all around badass. And he's actually coming back on the show in a couple of weeks to share his personal story. But we're getting the sexting episode out there quick so you can spend your summer getting hot and bothered on your phone.
Yeah, I'd like to think he taught us a lot, but we also taught him some things too.
I don't really know if we did.
I don't know.
But he definitely taught us a lot, and he's going to teach you a lot. So thank you, Bex. We're super excited to get this out there. We'll see all of you on Friday. And then again,
next week, we have our regular Wednesday episode, and it'll be with Allie and Galen.
Yeah, they live on a boat.
They do.
So that's super awesome. Our first boat people.
I don't know if they would appreciate being called boat people or not.
I think we know them well enough to know they'll be okay being called boat people.
Anyway, come back, listen on Friday, and again next week, and we'll see you then.
I think the proper term is cruisers.
I think you're right.
But
anyway.
Boat people. We got boat people next week. All right. We'll see everybody in a week.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.